2nd. So the family and friends, it's a big group of people. It was the Beilhartzes and then a couple people that aren't directly related, but they're family friends that went on this camping trip. It was stated through multiple sources that Alfred went up to Fall River with his father, who was a William Beilhartz, to bathe. So this is like the morning. They just woke up, and their party friends who came with, Orrin Bronson and Walter Hansen, were both in the camping party. They went upstream to bathe as well. However, they went about 500 feet upstream, so they were just a little separated from where Alfred and his father were.
Yeah.
So from all the sources we've read, it seems as though Alfred's father finished and was heading back to camp, and Alfred wanted to keep playing by the river, so he went up by the other men that were upstream. Again, this is about 500 feet. So within, eye shot, you should be able to see it.
Yeah.
The issue was Orrin and Walter. Now, these are the two friends that were also bathing upstream. They returned to camp without Alfred. So as soon as they got back to camp, everyone realized he's not there, and they went into panic mode, just as you would if you were missing your 4-year-old, especially next to a stream.
Yeah.
So the family started searching immediately, frantically, and turned up nothing. So when they couldn't find him immediately, they contacted the ranger at Fall River Ranger Station. His name was Muma, and I couldn't find if that was his first or last name. I'm guessing it's the last name. It's Ranger Muma.
Yeah.
So that's Moomaw. So Muma activated the Civilian Conservation Corps. We're calling them the CCC or CCC. And when I was reading through this, I was actually amazed because this is the 30s. The amount of time they were able to get people together was fascinating. So within 45 minutes, there's an estimated 100 CCC enrollees searching under the leadership of Muma and the chief ranger, Barton Hirschler. So they got 100 people together, the chief ranger together, and they already start searching in under an hour in the 30s. It's not like they could call people up on their cell phones or things like that. So it was pretty incredible. They were in luck, though, and this was a pretty cool tidbit. So there's a guy by the name of W.C. Hilgedick. He was a chief radio engineer for all of the National Park Service. He happened to be at the park at that time, and he helped the teams establish communication via shortwave radio, and this was like a brand new invention at the time. So, I mean, this is like a new thing, like to have radios and communicate.
So this was at the time, a revolutionary technology that we'd compare to probably some type of drone technology today.
Oh, yeah. Or I would say compared to like that heat signature stuff that they use in the things to like find heat and differential. So we talked about that with Joshua Tree.
Yeah.
Like how it'll just snap photos and the computer runs an algorithm to look for anomalies that aren't part of nature. So like for them, it was these radios so the teams could communicate. And the radios were so large, they had to be carried on the backs of the people using them. So think about like Saving Private Ryan when they're trying to communicate in the front.
Yep.
And they have that guy whose his only job is to be,
guy.
Yeah, he's just the radio guy because it's so huge. So they're using these in the park. So they were able, again, to assemble this massive team in under an hour. And then the guy who's the new chief radio engineer for the entire Park Service happens to be there as well. So they had a lot of stuff.
Very coincidental.
It's very coincidental, and they had a lot of good stuff going for them. So you feel like if he was there, like there would have been early success.
Yeah.
However, they had all these people. There was no finding the boy at all. So now we're fast forwarding July 4th. So this is a couple days later after the search is still ongoing. They started adding bloodhounds to the search. So they went to the local state penitentiary and got 50 fresh CCC members, and they still uncovered nothing. So now we have upwards of 150 people searching. Dogs are now involved. So we're going to go to July 5th now. And this is where they started taking really drastic measures.
Yeah.
They actually diverted the river that was feeding the main river, and they dragged the entire thing. So they basically stopped the flow of water and dragged every inch of the river because at this point they're thinking they're on a recovery mission.
Yeah.
And they got nothing. They also had the teams deeply search the woods and brush within a 10-mile radius. So now you have, 3 days of pretty intense activity going on in a small area. And we'll always go back to, this is a 4-year-old boy. So it's not like if he's in the river, you think of the worst thing, he drowns or he gets swept downstream. They're dragging and they're pulling up everything. They're not finding his body. They're searching the immediate area. They're not coming up with anything. So they're doing this over several days and nothing. They're not finding anything at all.
Yeah.
So the next major timeline is now on July 11th. So at this time, is when they really started dwindling the team. So they had about 12 people only still searching the area. So they were starting to basically give up on this. And then it seemed like the last ditch effort was July 12th. And Cascade Dam Reservoir, which sits 2 miles below the confluence of Roaring River and Fall River, was drained entirely. So basically what they did was they dragged all the water, couldn't find anything. So they said, okay, maybe he drowned and made it all the way downstream.
Yeah.
They drained the entire reservoir. So they weren't even going to drag it. They drained it so they could see everything and could not find the boy.
Wow.
So, I mean, think about you think it was in the 30s, the amount of stuff they did in 10 days was incredible.
Yeah. No, and it really helped that they had, a lot of those guys from the CCC just in the park. So that, they were very fortunate to have that kind of manpower that quickly, which is shocking that they were able to assemble that many people that fast and they still weren't able to find anything.
Yeah, and that's where I think this really makes the books about being such a weird disappearance is. We talk about this a lot. It strikes me similar to the case that we just did last time, how he disappeared in like such a short window.
Carl.
Yeah, I feel like this is kind of the same thing. Like, yes, he's a small boy, but it was such a short window. So this 10-day search gained national attention and even the eye of the FBI because they started thinking, okay, maybe this is a kidnapping.
Yeah, and when I read the eye of the FBI, I actually had to Google. For some reason, I thought the FBI hadn't been, created yet, but I was wrong.
Early. What year was it?
I want to say it was like 1919.
Okay, so I mean, it's only 12, 15 years old then at this point.
I'm going to search it quickly because I don't.
Yeah, I mean, it's very
1908.
1908. Okay,
yeah.
So it's still fairly new.
For some reason, I thought the FBI was created in the 50s, but
that's probably when they started getting shady. Great. Now we're on a list. Yeah. Now we're on a list.
You're on the list. Not me.
You're like, I like America.
I like them.
Yeah. So, oh man. So anyway, the FBI, which are great and they help everybody, they join in and because they think it's related to potentially a kidnapping or something. So they're coming in and lending a hand, which again gives more, firepower behind this effort. So there's a couple of things I didn't throw into the timeline, but I want to throw in now after we kind of went through. So that timeline followed, okay, that Alfred went missing. A lot of people are thinking it's a drowning.
Yeah.
So they're focusing a lot on the water. But then this tidbit kind of comes in after, which changes things up a little bit. So a day after he disappeared, so this is the July 3rd,
yep.
A couple hiking about 6 miles away from the Beilhartz camp. And this is again about 2,500 to 3,500 feet of elevation higher than what their camp is. They reported seeing a boy who looked like Alfred sitting on a high ridge in a treacherous area called Devil's Nest near the top of Mount Champlain. The boy was gone.
This was just creepy. I was just picturing myself, walking down a trail kind of, towards the summit. And, off in the distance, you hear this crying child, like 3,000 feet above you, like way off on this ledge. And in an area that is very dangerous. And it would just be the creepiest, like, only thing you can make it creepier is like a full moon and like fog rolling in.
Yeah, if it was night, like that'd be the worst. But this hiking couple said they walked far up the Old River Road until they became tired. They said they stopped to rest, and then looking far up the mountainside is when they saw the boy sitting on a rock. So they quickly climbed up to where they saw the boy, like hopefully any good person would do, and say like, wow, there's a little kid up there.
Yeah.
But by the time they got there, he had disappeared. So they expressed belief that no child could have reached that spot without assistance. So you think of like a 4-year-old. Yeah. Like they don't do very hard stuff. So if there's people listening that don't have kids, I have a lot of them. I always say like they will wander, but they're like, they don't wander up mountains.
They take the path of least resistance.
Exactly. They look at things that are interesting. They'll like try and climb stuff, maybe fall. They kind of go in circles, they don't beeline. And again, this is 6 miles from where they were. So that leads to, and there were no
35 feet up, 3,500 feet up too.
Yeah. So, I mean, that elevation gain is incredible, and it's an entire day later. And, remember, that's a day and a half to 2 days of 100 people like shouting his name, looking for him in a 10-mile radius. So well beyond that short distance. And he would have come out if that was him. But then that leads you to believe, what boy was that? If that's not Alfred, there's another young boy that was missing that wasn't reported. So it's either that was Alfred, or it wasn't, or it was something else that's unexplainable.
Unexplainable, or maybe the people hiking, maybe what they thought was a cry was maybe some type of bird or something. And
maybe, but they still saw him.
Yeah,
and that's what gets me, is they saw him and tried going to him, and then by the time they were able to get up there, he wasn't there anymore.
Yeah, that's puzzling. I don't know. I don't know what to say to that. I would lean on the thought of they saw something, they thought it was a child, but it was something else. Like, I'm not saying something else like,
like
Bigfoot
maybe like
a
big bird or something that kind of looks like one, and they mistook it for something else. Yeah,
and it made us, it made a sound, and it kind of sounded like somebody crying, and maybe they were far enough away you couldn't, you're not going to be able to get
if it was getting later in the day, and I only am thinking about this just because I was just hiking to where we got to our base and literally turned around and went back to the car, and we weren't planning to. So by the time we were getting towards the end of the hike, I'd been moving for about 9 hours straight. It was getting dark out. I was exhausted. I was dehydrated.
Yeah.
And you start seeing like wood from far away that like kind of looks like a face, like things like that. So you start seeing things that like aren't necessarily real. So maybe it was something like that, where maybe, like you said, they heard a bird cry, and they look up and they see something that looks like a child, but maybe as you get closer, it doesn't.
Yeah.
To the point where like, oh, that child is gone.
I mean, when I was in the Tetons, towards the end of our hike, the first day, we were tired, and every like turned, log I saw off in the distance, I thought was like a grizzly. So I can understand, seeing something, and, once you get closer, you're like, oh, it's a log. I'm so stupid.
Yeah. Well, and then there's another tidbit that they put in that, again, that led them towards thinking now maybe this is a kidnapping, was they found a bandage in a nearby cabin. And why that's significant is Alfred was given a bandage that it was similar to it because he had a blister on his foot from walking. So they found this bandage, and R.D. Brown, he's the chief of the FBI field office in the area. So he's the one that came out to represent the FBI.
Yeah.
He said the bandage was taken and was going to be examined microscopically and compared to bandages the mother was carrying, and nothing conclusive was found. The mother swears that it was the same one, but they basically did like a match comparison to the bandages that group was carrying to see if it was similar.
Yeah.
And they couldn't definitively say whether it was or not.
And, it's crazy because of the time this happened in.
Well, that's what makes you think is like, is it, you can't even say faulty science. There wasn't forensic science really.
There's no DNA back then.
Yeah, there's not anything that we have now. So, I mean, were they just not advanced enough at that point in time to determine it, to where they're just comparing fibers under a microscope to see if they're the same?
Yeah, that's the thing I'm kind of going towards is, they can look, at the bandage under a microscope and see if it, looks similar to other bandages, but they can't
see
test
if it's the same brand or something, or
they can't test
style.
any of the blood on the bandage for DNA. Today they probably could test the blood and then take a sample from the parents, and I'm sure they could probably come to a reasonable
That just made me think if they still had the bandage, they could probably test it.
Yeah, I don't know. And
then find a Beilhartz family member that's still alive, and just, you can tell if it's a DNA match.
But that it is just kind of not funny, but it's just, the 30s, that's really the most, they could do, is just see if the bandage was manufactured the same as the other bandages.
Top of the line science. Let's look at this thing under a microscope and see if it matches the fibers. Like that was it. That was like that's what the FBI was doing. That's the best you could do. Local police departments probably couldn't even do that. Just have a microscope. Yeah. If you think about it, it's the 30s. Like it was tough back then, but compared to earlier, it's even tougher. So, I mean, they just keep getting better and better. So the last tidbit that came in, and what's really neat, Mike, is I found a ton of these newspaper clippings. So like the actual stories from the newspaper. Yeah. So we have those with the case material. We'll put those on the website. But 4 months after the disappearance, the parents actually received a ransom note asking for $500 and say the boy was alive. So that they equated that to like $6,000 or $7,000 or $8,000 today, which still seems like a very small amount of money.
Yeah.
So investigators at that point determined it was a hoax and it never went anywhere from there. But the father and the mother were adamant that he didn't drown and that he was kidnapped, but they kind of left it at that.
So some opportunistic person saw a way to make a buck and like, I'm going to leave a note and.
Yeah, it's like just like either a sick joke or like an opportunist person. Like maybe I can make a quick buck off of these people, and which is really terrible to think about. But
that's a theme kind of throughout all these cases. The families always, while drowning, animal attack, those kinds of things are probably the most logical explanation. People closest to the people who've gone missing like to think that, maybe it was a kidnapping or some type of foul play. You never want to. You always, I think maybe they say, kidnapping to hold out hope that maybe Alfred is still alive.
Well, I wonder if it's like, if I can psychoanalyze without having a degree or any experience in that field. But I just want to say, like, if I think about it in that regard of if it happened to me, it'd be extremely terrible. I almost wonder if you hope that that's the case because you feel less at fault. Because if one of my kids drowned in a river because I made one little mistake or like looked away.
Yeah.
Like that's on me.
Yeah.
Versus versus if somebody were to kidnap them, that's still on you, but it's kind of like someone else was involved versus it's not 100% your fault. And again, I'm speculating here because if someone came up and took my kid and was opportunistic when I wasn't looking, I would still beat myself up to the day I died. If I couldn't get him back, I would, but it would be in a weird way, not as bad as if I turned my back and they drowned. Yeah. Like, I feel like that would be 100 times worse because I'm in 100% control of that situation.
Yeah. I only mention that because we've done enough cases now where a lot of the cases, the loved ones always suspect something more sinister, something, foul play, kidnapping, even though probably in a lot of these cases, the most likely explanation is injury, getting lost, animal attack,
so coming to exposure over time, especially for the young kids,
things like that. And it's just interesting. I maybe it's just a part of human psychology that people, want to believe it, something like that. So they hold out hope.
They need an answer. They need closure of some point, and like just getting he must have drowned, but there's no proof.
Yeah.
Between the two, it's almost like you said, maybe if he's kidnapped, there's still a possibility he's alive. So if that's like the way the brain moves to like hold on hope and grasp onto that, well, maybe he's okay. Maybe again, it's kind of like a weird thing. Like that would be good if he was kidnapped and still alive because drowning is done. He's actually dead. So if you think he's been kidnapped, you can still cope with the fact that he's alive somewhere.
Yeah, and the only reason why I even bring that up is because there does seem to be some type of common thread in a lot of these cases.
Oh yeah, I agree.
Yeah, this isn't the first time we've read that family members close to the person that went missing believe something else happened than what the logical theory is or what the official theory is. So that's all I was bringing up, and I find it interesting that time and again we see that same kind of thing happening.
Sure.
Where I guess I'll get into the official theories here for Alfred, but it's now that we've done enough of these, we can kind of start to see kind of commonalities between each case. A main commonality I see is, lack of preparation, not taking the wilderness serious enough.
Yeah, the proper precautions, especially for I think the biggest one is river crossings in general.
Yep.
Especially now, this isn't relevant to this case per se, but I was even thinking about this when I was out hiking. Every time we cross even like a creek that's moving swiftly.
Yeah.
I unbuckle my backpack instinctively every time. I take everything off in case I go in, because there's a lot of stories of, you might be able to swim even with a current.
Yeah.
But you get a 30-pound bag on your back that starts getting waterlogged, and hiking backpacks are clipped to you in 4 different spots sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
that can pull you under, and then in a panic, you might not be able to undo it, and you could just drown trying to get out of your backpack.
Yeah.
So it's where it's like, I'm a pretty seasoned hiker. So are you. I either unclip it and put it on one shoulder, or I carry it in my hand. I don't ever have it on my back for reasons of I don't trust it. And that could be in 2 feet of water that's moving swiftly. I don't care. And I think a lot of people like, oh, I've played in rivers before, but it's completely different when you're out there and in a mountain where you don't know if there's a deep spot, if it's, right now it's spring, summer, so there's a lot of mountain runoff.
Mm-hmm.
So at that time, if there's a lot of rainfall and the river is moving really swiftly, that could have been the thing that did it. You're going in there to take a bath, and maybe normally the river's calm. You've been there before, but maybe it rained a couple days beforehand and you're still having that high flow rate. So water's, super powerful, and you have to take it seriously when you're out in backcountry.
Yeah, and I mean, a 4-year-old is not going to be able to put up any kind of fight against, a river if they get into a river that's, flowing too fast.
Well, yeah, a river that's 2 feet deep might be half his body height or more.